think on average I lecture 4 to 6 times a week, and I remember once, this is maybe 32, 33 years ago. I was in New York, and there was a sannyasi speaking, giving a lecture, one of our gurus, one of our leaders. And then I flew to Los Angeles and was at the temple in Los Angeles, and that same sannyasi showed up in the temple in Los Angeles. And, you know, we have classes pretty much every day, morning and evening. Specifically in the morning, we have a class on the Srimad Bhagavat. It's one of our sacred texts. And we go through the text sequentially. The book has about, give me a little more volume on this. You know where the volume is? Lower right-hand corner. The book has about 14,000 verses in it. It says it has 18,000 verses, but if you actually count them all up, it's about 13,500 to 14,000, depending on how you count it, where you break the verses. So that means if you were to lecture on the book every day, one verse, that's 365 in a year, and so it would take you about 30 plus years to go through the whole book. It doesn't quite work like that because sometimes there's several verses that go together. So usually a temple rolls through the whole book in about 10 years. And then, they'll start it up again. We do the same thing with the Gita. The Gita has 700, 701, 702 verses, depending. And we lecture on it every week. And so that should take us 14 years to go through, but sometimes we'll lecture on a dozen verses, sometimes 2 dozen, sometimes 5, it depends. So we go through it every couple of years and then we start again. But this is important because in the New York temple, they were in one book in the Bhagavatam, and in the Los Angeles temple, they were in a completely different book. Do you follow? So just absolutely, they're 2 completely different subject matters. But the sannyasi came from New York to LA, and I heard him lecture in both places, and he gave exactly the same lecture in both places. He gave exactly the same lecture in both places. Yeah.
So I just wanted to ask, so what's the accurate one? So which one was the ideal one?
Yeah, I got it. I got your question. Neither.
Okay.
Because if you deliver a lecture that could be delivered in 2 different places, and you're supposed to be linking your lecture to the text you're exploring, and you can give the same lecture in both places, it means you're not actually being obedient to the text. It means you're just saying what you want to say, and you're using the excuse of lecturing on a book in order to introduce your own thoughts that have nothing to do with the book. They're not derivative of that particular section you're studying from. This critique was made, was a big, this is a sannyasi now, not from our organization, from one of our sister organizations, from one of our Gaudiya mutts. This is also 30, 35 years ago. Came to Los Angeles. He was Indian, lifelong celibate monk, showed up in Los Angeles, not from our institution. So we always sort of view those people like with a little bit of suspicion because they're not from our exact lineage. He was a disciple of one of Prabhupada's godbrothers as opposed to either a disciple of Prabhupada or one of his direct godbrothers. And so, but anyway, view with a little bit of suspicion. And he noted in the class, he was sitting in a class, where someone who was young enough to be his grandchild was giving a lecture. And he raised his hand in the class. He wasn't permitted to speak because he wasn't from our institution. And he noted, he raised his hand to give a comment. And he said, your class was not related to the Bhagavatam. I'm confused. Like I don't understand. Prabhupada writes purports. Prabhupada's purports are related to the individual verses he's commentating on. Prabhupada was following in a tradition where we go through verse by verse and we commentate on each verse. And the commentation is derivative of the verse, and it's meant to explain the verse by referencing other texts. And if you look at Prabhupada's purport and you want to know why did Prabhupada speak like that in his purport, you just look at the verse he's commentating on, and you'll see that his commentary is always just obviously linked to the verse he's commentating on. Does that make sense? It's pretty obvious, right? Like you go to a math class, and the teacher has a math formula written on the blackboard, and then he talks, and he's going to talk about that formula that's written on the blackboard. It's common sense. It's not like some kind of big revelation here. And this person was stunned at how we weren't actually lecturing on the verses we were reciting. We would just recite the verse almost as a religious observance, and then the lecturer would just speak on whatever they want to speak on. Do you guys follow this? And I experienced this many times, more times than I care to admit, where people do this, where they just use the verse, almost like a politician will use a baby. Like the politician will walk into a soup kitchen and grab a spoon and start stirring a pot. And then the photographers are photographing him. And then he'll serve a plate of food and hand it to a person and, look at the cameras. And it's like the ultimate in virtue signaling. And then as he's walking out the door, he'll see a mother and a child. He'll rip the baby out of the mother's arms and hold the baby, take a photo, and throw the baby back at the mother, and on to the next. I've seen us use our text like that, where we have an idea of what we want to talk about, and then we piously recite the verses, but then we talk about whatever it is that's on our mind, which may have nothing whatsoever to do with the verses, and it's a little insulting. Worse still, you're uncreative enough that you just can a lecture and memorize it, and then just go around and deliver the same lecture to different groups of people who are at different levels of understanding. And worse still, you're reading from different books and delivering the same lecture. Chances are you're not honoring any of those texts. There could be some exception to this rule where someone gets overtaken by ecstatic emotions and speaks from the heart and overwhelmed. But of course, if you're delivering the same canned lecture, chances are you're not getting overwhelmed in the exact same way every single time. Okay, you guys got me? So I have made it, even though I lecture, let's say 5 times a week on average, I make it a point to never give the same lecture twice, ever. Do I ever give the same lecture twice, Rupanugaji?
No problem.
Never, right?
That's why I come regularly.
Number one, it's insulting to give people the same canned lecture. Number two, it demonstrates a lack of creativity on my part because I'm not having original thoughts and realizations. And number three, it's insulting to the texts I'm studying because it shows I'm not really linking what I'm saying to those texts. I'm just using them almost as a springboard and without really honoring them properly. You guys follow this? Anyway, today I'm going to lecture on the same verse twice. I lectured on it last night. I'm going to lecture on it again. I normally don't do that, but sometimes, very occasionally, I won't say everything I want to say in a lecture, and so I'll go to the same verse, not to repeat what I've said, although I have to do a little bit of repetition, but I want to explore a further theme. And I had a thought I never had before while reading a text yesterday, and I've read the text 1,000 times. I've probably lectured on it 100 times. I've been reading this text for over 30 years. I've literally read it 1,000 times. I know the verse by heart, and I've lectured on it 100 times. I like the verse a lot, maybe even more than 100 times because I like the verse so much. But I saw something I'd never seen before just while talking about it, and I'm excited. And so I'm just going to work it out in real time with you guys because I wanted to think about it today, and I didn't have a chance to think about it today. So I'm going to think about it verbally and talk you through my thoughts right now. Got it? All right. Anudvega kadam vakyam. Speech which is not agitating. Vij means agitate. Utvij means like to bring the agitation, to rise up in agitation. Vij means an udveg. Veg comes from vij. Udveg means to rise up in agitation, and an anudveg means, without agitation. Anudveg kadam, without causing agitation. Like namaskar. Namaha means respect. Namaskar means I'm making my respects to you. And so, anudvega kadam, not making disturbances. Anudvega kadam vakyam, speech which does not create disturbances. Satyam priyam hitam chayat. Satya priya hitam chayat. And speech that is satyam, truthful. Satya means truth, comes from sat. Sat is a big verbal root in Sanskrit because sat gives rise to all sorts of words like the good, the true, the beautiful, eternal, spiritual. It has like many, many different meanings. Satyam, truthful. Priya hitam, pleasing. Or priyam could even be loving, depending on how you wanted to. Dear, pleasing, loving. I think that in general, priya would be rendered as pleasing. You agree? But pri also means dearness and fondness and love. And so priyam could also be, like if somebody is your priyam, they are your beloved. And so priyam can also mean that. And because not agitating is almost synonymous with pleasing. Because if your speech is not agitating, it's neutral, or more often, it's going to be pleasant. And therefore there'd be a fault of redundancy if you were to say that priyam meant just pleasing, because you've already more or less communicated that by saying not agitating, and therefore priying is more properly, in my opinion, rendered as loving. Hitam, beneficial. It also goes together there nicely. Priya hitam is a compound, and so it's pleasing and beneficial, or I think even better, it's loving and beneficial. What do you think of that? Yeah, I thought this yesterday too, for the first time. I'd never really thought it through, but I thought of this yesterday. A lot of times we use the word loving in English, and you don't encounter that term in Vedic texts a lot. But we use the term in English all the time. To love someone, to love something, to be loving, to be lovely. We use the term and like as a noun, as a verb, and it comes up all the time in our speech, and it represents kind of a collective reality of how people feel towards one another. such that it comes up over and over again in our speech. And when you've got a concept that is so intrinsic to a language that it comes up almost daily in your usage, chances are you have to find an equivalent term in other languages. Did you follow that? Some things are so ubiquitous that it can't be specific to your culture. It has to be universal. But there's a real paucity, a real lacuna of this term loving in Vedic texts. We have terms for love. We have like prema, right? Kam. We have different terms which could be rendered as loving. You got like other terms like sneha, which affection, and rag, attachment, and anurag, more attachment. And so there's different terms which are used to communicate different types of erotic or platonic love. Other languages have te amo, te deseo. That means two different things in Spanish. And so you have like eros and agape in Greek, which means erotic love versus spiritual love. You have sometimes different terms because they want to make a distinction between worldly love and otherworldly love. Certainly that exists in Sanskrit. Desire is a bad thing. In Buddhism, Trishna is a bad thing. Thirst, desire, Kam for Krishna and the Gita are bad things. They have to be transcended. So that would be like erotic love or just selfish desire. But the term prema, it's not used all over Vedic texts. But you do find priya is used scores of times in the Gita. And I think probably most of those times it should be rendered as loving, beloved. Because you have to look at the context, but you need to do that in order to copy what we have in our culture, which is a place where love is a regularly expressed emotion between people. And there has to be a language and an easy terminology that can be used. Did you follow that argument? What do you think? I want more from you than just an endorsement. I want you to actually comment on what I've said, please.
Well, I never thought about this that way, but you're right. I mean, if love is used so commonly, then we have to find an equivalent in Sanskrit.
And we should find it all over our texts.
Yeah, and Priya is used so many times. Krishna in Bhagavad Gita says so many times.
So many times. Because you're asi priyo me, right? Because you're so dear to me, right? Well, that must be because you're so beloved by me. Because I love you so much. It must be that. Right? Yeah. That was something I wanted to explore. I didn't have a chance to explore last night in that much detail. And so, satyam, priyam, hitam. Hitam means beneficial. Chayat, it's speech which is also this. That is also like this. And then swadhyaya, abhyasanam chaiva. And also the regular recitation of Vedic texts. Vanmaya tapa uchate. This is called tapa, austerity, vanmaya, consisting of speech. The austerity of speech, regulated speech, proper speech, consists of speaking words that are unagitating, truthful, loving, and beneficial. And it also consists of regularly reciting Vedic literature. Adhyaya means to recite, to study, swa, oneself. So it means reading oneself, to study by oneself. St. Augustine was famous because he could read without moving his lips. It was very uncommon thousands of years ago for people to read with a closed mouth. Generally when people read, they would speak what they read. It's just how people studied. How do we know that? Because Augustine, a famous early church father in Christianity, was specifically noted because he read without moving his mouth. And so when you see that, and actually swadhyaya really just means to recite one's text to oneself, and you see this all over India. You see people reciting out loud Vedic texts to themselves. You see them sitting down and reciting out loud, but they're reading, but they're reciting it because it's holy and they feel there's a benefit in speaking it. So they speak it as well as hear it, even if there's no one in the room. You get the benefit of speaking it as well as hearing it. It also is why we chant out loud, because that chanting also results in you hearing. Rupa Goswami speaks about chanting, and you desire millions of tongues. And then when you hear your chanting, you desire millions of ears. And so there's this process. It's almost like a self-contained process, where when you chant japa, or when you do kirtan, that you're able to both speak and hear, and you get the benefit of both, and it creates a very full experience. We even include a tactile feature, because we touch tulsi wood while we chant. Devotees sometimes use clickers. I don't use a clicker, but sometimes devotees use clickers, which I think are great because it means you're still chanting, which is fantastic. But one devotee from the Radha Raman temple, very, very proper temple in Vrindavan, where we get much of our deity worship from their temple, which has been around for 500 years and is famous for doing excellent deity worship. And so his name was Srivatsa Goswami. He's passed away now. He was their mahant, their leader of the temple. He came to the U.S. and we picked him up at the airport. Not me personally, but our group picked him up from the airport. And he saw a devotee chanting on a clicker. And he said, please get one tulsi bead and put it on the clicker where you put your finger. He said, then it'll be okay. But he was disturbed to see someone chanting without touching tulsi. And so his request was, you can use that gizmo, that device, but at least you put a tulsi bead on there so that you get the benefit of touching tulsi while you're speaking, while you're hearing. Interesting, right? So this is the austerity of speech. Krishna's instructing Arjuna that the context of this section is that Arjuna is being taught what are austerities of the body, mind, and words. Kaya, manas, vacha. Your body, mind, and words. We generally, from René Descartes, we think of a dualistic world where things are either done with the physical body or they're done within the mind. And we usually break the world down into what's called the phenomenal world and the numinous world, the world of body and the world of mind. Numen means mind, from nous in Greek. And so it's not a very commonly used word, actually, nowadays. It's more of a philosophical term that's fallen by the wayside. But we normally break the world down into a body and a mind, your thoughts and your body. In India, they have a 3-part breakdown of the world. It's body, mind, and words. And I think words are a really important junction between your thoughts and your deeds. And so to note them as a discrete unit, I think makes for a much richer and fuller understanding of what goes on in your life. You think certain things, you do certain things, but in between your actions and your thoughts is usually you talk about them. You talk about them. So Krishna goes through body, mind, and words, how to control your body, mind, and words, and what that looks like in sattva, rajas, and tamas, in goodness, passion, and in ignorance. And so I think a lot of what we encounter in the world is when we're encountering information and we're digesting information. I think a lot of what we encounter in the world is we encounter taxonomies, we encounter systems of categorization, body and mind, and words, goodness, passion, and ignorance, 7 habits of highly effective people, an arts degree or a science degree. We categorize things, and that's very important because you encounter this world and it's just filled with stuff. And you got to try and get your bearings. And so human beings are designed to recognize patterns and to categorize what they encounter. Interestingly, like the color red universally gets people's attention. It's great that red is stop signs and danger signs, because even in nature, red signifies danger, a red flower. And it also signifies blood. And so it gets people's attention all over the world from every culture. Like, envy is yellow in German. Envy is green, here in the U.S. So it's kind of arbitrary whether envy is, but blue is never associated with food. Because food should not be blue, and if food is blue, it's generally speaking fungal and poisonous, and you shouldn't eat it. And that probably honestly includes blue cheese, which is nasty. I also think blue cheese is not meant for human consumption. Even then, it's got a little bit of blue, and I think that still makes it nasty. Just my opinion. Blue is never associated with food. Red, orange, yellow, associated with food. So some things are cultural, like with green and yellow for envy, depending on a different culture, but some of them are universal. And so we look for categories. We taxonomize things. We organize things. Plants and animals. Friends and enemies. It's useful. It's essential for survival. And so I think when we're studying the world and when we're talking to people, we generally get two things. We either get systems of categorization, where people have novel and interesting and brilliant ways of grouping things together in the world. And we look at that and we're like, oh, that's brilliant. Like, that really enhances my ability to navigate the world. The other thing we encounter is we encounter great ideas. We encounter great ideas. Ideas that don't necessarily categorize the world, but they just blow your mind and enrich your mind. And I think Krsna does both those things in this verse. He offers us a system of categorization, austerity of body, mind, and words. He then mentions what the austerities are. You can memorize them, and there's some value in that. It's a good, handy list. Is my speech truthful? Is it meant to help somebody? Is it coming from a loving place? And is it not unnecessarily agitating? And Prabhupada, in his brilliant purport, and I mentioned this yesterday, this is repetitive, but Prabhupada mentions in his brilliant purport, which you can see is perfectly attuned to troubleshooting the verse on our behalf. Prabhupada's purport answers the doubt that every intelligent person should have when they hear that speech should be unagitating. Well, what happens when truth and not disturbing somebody come in conflict with one another? And Prabhupada tackles that right out the gate. One should not speak in such a way so as to agitate the mind of others. Prabhupada's mirroring Krsna, creating the same doubt. Of course, when a teacher speaks, he can speak the truth for the instruction of his students. But such a teacher should not speak to those who are not his students if he will agitate their minds. And so Prabhupada introduces a really interesting point, that not everybody needs to hear every thought you have. And this is a weird phenomenon in the world today that did not exist when I was growing up. The advent of social media has created a universe where people publicize what they had for lunch, what color lipstick they're wearing today, what shirt they chose to wear, what color tie they're wearing today, and every single thought they have throughout the day. And it wasn't just enough where we had blogs, which created this phenomenon, but then with the advent of Facebook, we could link it to pictures and slightly long form commentary. So you had to, and then it gradually got shortened to Instagram and Twitter, where now you're down to just a small amount of characters. And it became favorable, and then they added stories to everything, which intensified the problem because now you don't even have to commit to a whole post. Just any nonsensical experience or thought you have, you can just in moments share. And like with Snapchat, you're not owned by it forever. It just lasts for a day, and then it goes away. And so if it was useless or it was pathetic or whatever it was, it's gone a day anyway, and so there's no fingerprints. People can't track you, and you can say all sorts of dumb stuff, and you haven't left a trail. Just the act of posting things, which now like posting something has become long-form commentary, and it's like a big deal, it's a big commitment to post something. But that itself was just the death of profound communication. It also helped people to be very succinct, which is valuable. I'm not saying it's all bad. I'm being a little purposefully and satirically cynical to make my point. But with things like stories, you just share anything with people. What brand of toilet paper you're using. Just awful stuff. I don't know. That was a tangent. That was me kind of going off. That was when I mentioned that sometimes you get inspired. That was inspiration. Can somebody bring me back to reality, please? So I don't do exactly what I. Yeah. Yeah, that's not close enough. Yeah. Yeah, the death of austerity of speech. Yes, sir. No, don't do that to me. I'm trying to get back on track. If you now interrupt me, you'll just tangent me again. Don't do that. I'll save it. I'll come back to you. I want to hear what you have to say. But I'm just trying to get myself back on track, so if you tangent me again, we're done. It's over. I might as well just kill myself now. Don't do that. Don't push me off the cliff, okay? I just crawled back up on the cliff. You're like, go! Yeah. It used to be you had to write a letter to somebody with a pen. I studied penmanship in school. I studied calligraphy in school. I wrote letters to people. And Mark Twain one time said, I'll write you a long letter because I don't have time to write you a short one. Short letters, they take so much effort. What to speak of if you're writing it, you can't make any mistakes. So you probably don't even remember this, but it used to be that when you would write something, you would sit for like 5 minutes and write a sentence in your mind and edit it over and over again in your mind and get your thoughts together and spend hours thinking about what you want to say, and then you put pen to paper. It's just the opposite of help. Texting also hasn't helped. I mean, it's good for keeping people in touch, but so much is lost when people don't speak carefully and when they just verbally vomit on one another. So having some austerity and governing your speech and doing the math, am I coming from a loving place? Is this pleasing? Is this truthful? Is this beneficial? Am I not going to unnecessarily agitate this person? This is beautiful. And now I'm back to what I want to say. This point about are you everybody's teacher is brilliant. I remember I was having dinner here one day, and some woman came, some unmarried woman came in her 60s, and proceeded to give me some advice about how to converse with my wife. We were having a robust conversation like we always have. And so she started instructing me how to speak to my wife. And I wasn't like yelling at my wife. It wasn't like some kind of bad situation where she had to do an intervention. We were just talking, and she interrupted the conversation and gave us her thoughts. And I said to her, hey, I'm not particularly interested in your opinions on my conversation. And she was just flabbergasted that she didn't have an open invite to offer commentary on my life. Her being in the same room didn't just give her an open invitation to just, interrupt a conversation between two people and just spew whatever nonsense she wanted to spew, and that wasn't welcome. She was so stunned. She was silent, and she just didn't know what to do. And like 30 seconds went by, and she was trying to speak, but she was stuttering, and she just walked off in a huff. But you shouldn't automatically assume that every single person you meet wants to hear every single thought you have about every single thing you're thinking. And a lot of what social media has done is created this false platform for people where they're just putting everything out there. And so oftentimes the quality of what you get goes way down. We also have access to the entirety of human knowledge now on a phone that you can carry in your pocket, which is it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. I wanted to look up the etymology of adhyaya to see if it came from D, which means to think, because I thought dhya might come from D. D-H-Y-A might come from D-H-I, which is a Sanskrit dhatu, a verbal root. And so I went out and got out an etymological dictionary while Rector was doing kirtan and looked it up real quick. I couldn't find out the answer, and I got to give class. But you can do that kind of stuff on your phone now. It's just unbelievable. Instead of going to a library and knowing the Dewey Decimal System, which I know, so you can go and quickly find a book you want. And then you're limited to what books are available in that library, which is a fraction of the books that exist in the world. Plus, if you have to search through everything, it takes you, 50, 100,000 times as long. But Prabhupada's point here is brilliant, that we should not assume we are everyone's teacher. And if we are going to risk agitating someone in the service of truth, because it's not always possible to balance all of these features simultaneously of being not agitating, loving, truthful, and beneficial. For sure, 3 of them you can do. Truthful, beneficial, and loving. You can always do those. But the unagitating, you can't always do. And Prabhupada offers a resolution, a brilliant resolution, which is what good commentary should be. It should be directly related to the verse, and it should explain things and troubleshoot the verse for you and enrich your understanding. And that's the way to give a class. That's the way to have the mango get sweeter. A classic example is a mango, when it's pecked by a parrot, it gets sweeter because it breaks the skin and hastens the ripening process. Instead of a parrot pecks the mango, then a few hours later that mango is sweet because it hastens the ripening process and creates just a little bit more sugar content. So the mango is perfectly delectable. And so we say that when a great devotee touches the Vedic texts, he's like a parrot. And he sweetens it. It becomes even better. Following in that vein, I had a thought, and this is what I want to explore in further detail. Everything else has been a warm-up to get us to this point. The term swadhyaya abhyasanam, which means to practice, abhyas, recitation of sacred text, swadhyaya, is included in austerity of speech. And partially that's because you would speak the Vedic text out loud, so it was something you were doing with your mouth. But I had another thought yesterday that I'd never thought before, and that really inspired me. This creates a check and balance system so that when you speak truth, it's not merely your truth, which is just a fancy euphemistic way of saying your opinion. but you want your opinion to be unchallengeable. Therefore, you call it my truth, which is like profoundly offensive and grandiose and really smacks of delusions of grandeur. Anytime somebody says my truth, I think that person has delusions of grandeur. They should go see somebody about that. Truth is truth and not opinion precisely because it's objectively verifiable. And it's not merely your truth, it's truth. And if it's just merely your truth, then why don't you just call it your opinion? We have a great word in English that communicates that it's your truth. And that's my opinion. But it's too humble for people. And so people got to say my truth. And then when you disagree with them, oh, hey, whoa, this is my truth. Okay, Jack, well, this is my truth. My truth is that your truth is bogus. You going to offend my truth? And I got evidence for my truth. I think my truth is actually just truth. And I got the evidence to show you. And we can have a discussion and compare ideas and grow. When Krsna mentions that you should regularly study our wisdom literature, he's now offering you a way to get that truth that you will share with people. A non-arbitrary, well-established way of getting to truth that you can then deliver in a loving and beneficial way. You could even argue that wisdom literature will teach you what's beneficial for people as well. Not only will you know what's truth, but you'll also know what's beneficial. It might even teach you how to love. It might even teach you how not to agitate people. It might give you everything. And we do this. When you go to a university and you study a subject systematically, you're trying to go beyond your impoverished thoughts and encounter great ideas that have been distilled and honed over millennia, over centuries. When you study algebra, that al in algebra meant the Muslims came up with it. That's how old it is. Algorithms, algebra, you're going all the way back to the golden age of Islam when you're studying that stuff. You're studying geometry, you're rubbing shoulders with Pythagoras. You break the law, what that really means is you break state law, which is then written in consonance with federal law, which is then written in consonance with the Constitution, which is then based on the work of John Locke, which is based on the work of Plato, based on the Republic, based on social contract theory. Huge ideas. It took thousands of years. That's what goes into statements like, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equally and are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, such as the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We are referencing wisdom literature when we write laws. People sat down and thought it through. When you look at state law, it might seem like all these states, how they figure out all these laws. They actually had a group of hundreds of lawyers that got together for well over a decade and wrote a standard legal code for state law that all states can just borrow from and then modify to make it their own. But it's almost impossible to come up with a full legal code. And so hundreds of lawyers spent over a decade coming up with what has now become state law for most states. They're borrowing from a template, from a standard body of ultimately wisdom literature that's truthful, that's fair, that's reasonable. Scripture is called Shastra, from shush. Not like shh, not like that. But shush means to rule or to govern. And so Shastra are those texts which govern society. There used to not be a separation of church and state. And there wasn't a secular form of government, which it was very adjacent to religious texts. I mean, they say we hold these truths to be self-evident. That means we're not going to give evidence for it. We're taking it as an axiomatic eternal principle that all men are endowed by their Creator. So there's a Creator, and the Creator gave you certain inalienable rights. I mean, the whole idea is so unbelievably philosophical and theological. Because that's what you have to do if you want to come up with a fair system of law. You have to look for universal truths and then codify them in a fair way so that people can, it's not even like you secularize it. You really just make it non-sectarian is what you're trying to do. So that religion A doesn't govern everybody, like with Sharia. But you come up with a general system of what's fair, and then whatever your religious denomination is, that's okay. But then you don't get to, from your own sectarian belief system, force other people to believe what you believe. We're looking for a universal system of law. But it's like we have the Constitution in a building behind bulletproof glass. The urban myth is that it can be taken down underground to survive a direct nuclear hit because it's sacred. Because the whole country's founded on it. And that's not even it. I mean, Anglo law, it governs the whole world. Going back to things like the Magna Carta. You go back further to Hannibal. And so, I'm not arguing for like a theocracy or something like that. But I do want to point out that everybody to this day has to learn a body of wisdom literature, which really means encountering great permanent ideas and then governing your life in accord with them. And what that really means is you're just standing on the shoulders of giants. We have our own check and balance system called Guru Sadhu and Shastra. The teachers, the old teachers, and the scripture. But you also have to understand that really what are we talking about? Today's teacher becomes tomorrow's old teacher. And tomorrow's old teacher becomes the next generation's scripture. The teachers of thousands of years ago wrote their ideas down. They became so standardized, that became our sacred text. When you look at a Vedic text, it has a rishi attached to it. The rishi is the seer who saw that Vedic text. It's a universal truth that's always existed, but there was a seer who caught it and wrote it down. Just like you name a star after the person who first saw it. Just like you name a planet. You get to name a planet or a star. They saw the star and they wrote it down and it got their name attached. They didn't invent it. They saw it. Rishi means seer. That truth was always true. It's perennially been true. It's forever true. But somebody saw it and they wrote it down. And you start to collect that. And now you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can even disagree. You can put your own thought on stuff. But we all need to be governed by some source beyond ourselves so we can check ourselves and check our ideas and not reinvent the wheel. It's how you learn how to perform surgery. It's how you learn how to practice medicine. It's how you learn how to practice law. It's how you learn how to do math. It's how you learn how to do anything. Nobody just starts from scratch. We all stand on the shoulders of giants. Even the ability to think is developed in tandem with our ability to speak, and our ability to speak is done by mimicry of our parents. And so the brilliant thoughts you have in words are the result of mimicking those who came before you, which doesn't stop you from having brilliant ideas. It actually enhances your ability. It actually teaches you how to think. We think in language. Language is learned through mimicry. That doesn't stop us from breaking from the pack. That doesn't stop us from dissenting and having subversive notions. But we at least got to understand where it comes from. And so Krishna's statement here, that you have to regularly recite sacred text, gets to the heart of how you govern anything in your life, including your speech. how you develop character, how you learn ethics, how you help make the world a better place, how you everything. And so I used to just view this text as, here's a list of rules, like a system of categorization. And then maybe it also had these brilliant ideas. Remember I mentioned we learned systems of categorization, which are in and of themselves brilliant, and then we encounter these great ideas that we affix ourselves to. I used to view the text as being that, but what I saw last night, just as I was teaching, was just how universal this principle is. That we all have to encounter great ideas, great teachers. And when you do that, you're really touching infinity. It's like that iPhone in your pocket, but way better. Because you're touching all of recorded history through those teachers, through their writings. And if you believe in revelation, if you believe that sometimes ideas are given from above, that those ideas reach down from above, from a munificent creator, and there's some ideas which are spiritual and given from above, then you also get that, and takes you infinitely beyond what you would ever hope to encounter if you merely built a stairway to heaven, or rather reinvented the wheel. You don't have to turn off your cognitive faculties. You don't have to turn off your ability to doubt. You don't have to turn off your troubleshooting. You don't have to blindly follow anything. But we should understand the opportunity that's in front of us when we encounter a sacred wisdom tradition. We're having the opportunity to test a hypothesis that you might actually be in touch with the infinite. You might be able to touch something transcendent, transcendental, beyond this world. And as I was reading this text from Krsna, I just was filled with like appreciation. Appreciation is the wrong word. I was filled kind of like with awe at the magnitude and the broadness of the ideas that Krishna is communicating. And let me say it one more time, because I'm running out of time. We learn to speak when we can help someone, if they accept you as a teacher, and to do so in as least agitating a way possible, and to make sure you're always speaking the truth, and to make sure you're doing it from a place of love. Because you can benefit somebody without love. You can tell somebody something which is helpful for them and say it in a super mean way. You should be coming from a place of love and speaking the truth for that person's benefit in as least agitating a way as possible. These are ideas that you can take and use today, immediately, and every day for the rest of your life. It also categorizes the world into body, mind, and words, and goodness, passion, and ignorance, and gives you a list of 5 things to look at your speech is supposed to be. It's a brilliant system of categorization, and it's practical advice like that. Krishna also manages to point you in a direction for where you will find truth, and how to benefit people, and how to love people. He also shows you where you'll do that from a wisdom tradition. He also points out how everything we do is borrowing from others. Everything we do is standing on the shoulders of giants. Everything we do means we have to refer to something greater than ourselves. Even language is greater than us. We participate in language. We didn't invent it. And given that thought comes along at the same time language comes along from, our ability to think is also a gift that we owe to others. Our ability to communicate that is a gift we owe to others. And all the ideas we encounter we're getting from other people. And if every once in a while you have an original idea that nobody else had, you just haven't looked hard enough. You'll find that same idea way more brilliantly articulated by somebody other than you 500, 1,000, 5,000 years prior. And maybe you stumbled upon it, but then if you actually went to them, it would have been a lot faster and probably a lot more deep. And so Krsna manages to give us something specific we can use today. At the same time, he broadly offers us direction and commentary on the very nature of the pursuit of knowledge, the pursuit of truth, communication, how we learn everything. Did you follow that? And we find every government, every society, every religion, every tradition is doing exactly the same thing. They're passing down their teachings, standing on the shoulders of giants, one after another. Whether you believe in revelation or you just believe from the ground up, it doesn't make a difference. Everybody's standing on the shoulders of giants. Everybody's borrowing from those who came before them. And to make that part of your life puts you at least hypothetically, theoretically, potentially, that's the word I wanted. It puts you at least potentially in touch with the infinite. In a way that is not dangerous, that it can just be whimsy. And it can just be because you had the thought. And that's my truth. And I, in a social media-esque way, have suddenly elevated a random whimsical thought I have to being the key to unlocking and plumbing the depths of the universe. So I'll post it on my story. Do you guys follow this? This is what I thought of yesterday. I didn't have a chance to explore it fully last night, so I wanted to give it another bite from the apple and speak more on the topic. Rupanuga Prabhu, please.
My realization, hearing what you just said, that you are an empowered seer. As Krishna himself says and others say, that Gita is revealed to us as we study. And Krishna says that those who think of me all the time, I give them the wisdom. So this is indeed a revelation, and I'm so grateful to you.
All right, Krishna, all right, enough, come on. I kept waiting for you to finish. Is there anything, thank you very much. You're extremely kind. Your words are very magnanimous. You're elder to me in practically every way conceivable, including knowledge and morality and so many other wonderful qualities. I'm very fortunate to be in your good association, Prabhu. Is there anything else you'd like to share?
No, Prabhu, I just wanted to share my
All right, thank you. You're very kind. You're extremely generous. You're very kind. Thank you. Sean.
Can you read the...
Of course I can. Yeah, of course I can. Austerity of speech consists in speaking words that are truthful, pleasing, beneficial, and not agitating to others, and also in regularly reciting Vedic literature. Yeah, thank you. I should have done that. Thank you for correcting me. And sir, you want to say something?
I think you answered my question, sir. I was going to just ask about how can you be truthful and not agitate some other people.
Right? And Prabhupada troubleshot that, right? It's amazing, isn't it?
Thank you.
It's so helpful. When you get a good tradition, it's not that they're just off in limbo somewhere. They're actually thinking about exactly the same stuff we're thinking about, and they're rigorously resolving it. And then when you encounter it, they teach you the good questions to ask and the good answers. You learn both. It's almost like you learn critical thinking skills from studying a well thought out tradition, because they teach you what the questions are as well as what the answers are. Let's finish there. Thank you so very much. Hare Krishna.